Juliet Fay, welcome to Unbroken.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So why don't you tell us a bit about your background and how you found the principles?
Okay, so I was a searcher and a seeker and had been, I think, from a young age. And so the principles came across my path at a time in my life, I guess, when I was in a period of struggling more intensely than I had been. And I loved the stories of how people how people find the principles or how the principles find them, whichever way you want to say. And I came across it randomly, a video on YouTube, actually through an email that I'd signed up to but didn't usually read. And it's funny, isn't it? Because I'm actually quite good at keeping my inbox clean of when I'm no longer interested in something, I tend to unsubscribe. And this one had stayed there all these months and months and months, and I never opened them. And then one day the subject line just jumped out at me, and the webinar was called "Can an Insight Cure PTSD?"
Oh, nice.
And it was Mary Schiller being interviewed by Molly Gordon, who's a dear friend. So I'm sorry, Molly, that I didn't open all those emails before. And I didn't know much about PTSD. I didn't, but I was aware it was considered a mental illness. And who knows why, but something really piqued my curiosity to the extent that it was a live hangout you could join. And I missed it and then went back searching through my emails to find it again because it pinged again in my head. And I've really learned to trust this now. When something pings and you ignore it, it'll come back and just tap, tap, tap. And then if you still ignore it, and then it'll be bang, bang, bang. And so it goes. So I went and I found the recording. I watched it. It was an hour, and Mary Schiller talking about her experience of PTSD and how this thing called The Principles, and she'd read Michael Neill's book, I think his first book perhaps, and had a life-altering insight. And it really piqued my curiosity. I think that's all I can say at that point. There was there's something here. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a very common story. I went off and just gorged and just on principles materials, webinars, books, anything I could get my hands on. And for quite a while, and I went kind of really sort of deep into it. And I think, the first thing that I saw that was so helpful to me at the time, which is kind of maybe very obvious to maybe some people learn this already on the way, but somehow I'd kind of missed this one, which was that I am always at the effect of what looks true in my head at any given moment. If I believe what's going on in my head, then what I say and do will follow from that. And that's true for everyone else too. Now, that was so helpful because I'd spent decades trying to figure out and analyze why I was the way I was. And the way I was I had really unstable moods and to an extraordinary degree, which I looked at everything that could, from diet to genetics to, therapy and medication. I mean, like a lot of people, I tried everything: yoga, affirmations, eating kale, running. It was, and some things were helpful for a while. And I'm sure I now, from this distance, I guess I can see that, we're always having insights. So I was having insights, but things didn't, I guess, give me lasting change. And so this little, really quite simple idea that we're just at the effect of what looks true in any given moment, even if 2 minutes later that changes and what you felt and thought 5 minutes ago looks ridiculous to you, in the moment, that's all that's going on. And I do remember when I saw that, there was this huge relief that all this analyzing and trying to sort of get all my ducks in a row to get this perfect outcome. Of course, perfect outcome was part of the problem. Perfect outcome was, a sane, sweet woman. That's what I wanted. Which is flawed, let's face it, as an objective. But it just took away such sort of layers and layers of complexity for me, in that's all that's going on. And I'd love to say that then everything dissolved and I was fine, but that's not what happened for me. That was the starting point. So it didn't necessarily mean, it certainly didn't mean I wasn't at the effect of upsetting, distressing, very insecure thinking. I still was and still am. But it took away the need to go down all these rabbit holes of, is it diet? Is it genetics? Is it nurture, nature? Is it my work? Is it my relationships? Is it where I live? Is it my bank balance? Because you can see, I'm sure I wasn't alone in that many of us spend a huge amount of mental energy trying to figure out what the problem is and then trying to fix the problem. And sometimes we might, sometimes we don't. But I think for some of us, there's a pattern there that the seeking and working it out becomes an end in itself. Because part of us feels like we're doing something, we're trying to address it. And we actually just get very, very busy in our head and out in the world. In my case, projects were one of my coping mechanisms.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Wow. Well, you said so many interesting things there. And I had a huge insight while you were speaking. So many people who are on this show talk about all the things they've tried, myself included, to fix themselves, quote unquote. And almost everyone, to a person, including myself, says, the things were helpful for a while. And my insight just then was that that's because our thinking shifts momentarily. We think, oh, this is the thing that's going to fix me. This is the thing that's going to work. So yeah, there's this honeymoon period because our thinking has changed. And then of course, our thinking changes as it always does. And that fades away. And then we're on to the search for the next thing. So thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Well, that's really interesting what you said, because not only does your thinking change, but your thinking settles down.
Yes.
Because it looks like the solution is here.
Yep.
And so all that stuff we have running about, I'm wrong, it's wrong, that's wrong, everyone's wrong, whatever it is, quiets down. Yeah. And in that more settled mind, I mean, it looks very true to me that as the mind settles down, the body settles down. And a lot of the fixes we look at are trying to do that the other way around, trying to settle the mind to settle the body. And it's not to say, some deep breathing doesn't calm the nervous system a bit. But I think the power of insight is something I know you're interested in. And before our call, I was sort of reflecting a little bit. So yeah, insight, what is that, and why is it such a common term in this conversations around the principles, and what's different about that from a good idea or, a great strategy and I think for me, it's a good idea or a great strategy is something that I might try and put into place in my life. And I'll probably need prompts and reminders, and I might have to check in with why I thought it was such good. And my experience is that kind of relies on willpower to keep moving it forward. And sometimes I do, and sometimes I don't. Whereas insight feels that it's raw, is what I would call it.
Mhm.
Whereas a concept and an idea and a strategy is a bit abstract. It's like, oh, that's up there, looks really great on this web page, and now I've got to like pull it down and I've got to apply it, and you can feel it, can't you? It's kind of work.
Yeah.
And an insight feels more like something arises that you now know in your bones.
Mhm.
And because you know it in your bones, you don't have to think about it, you don't have to apply it. And so behavior shifting or behaviors dropping away, whatever it is, happens with apparently without effort. But maybe I should pause there because I've got another piece that I'd like to say about insight as well.
Right. Well, no, I love what you're saying, and for me it's pointing to that idea of freshness, but you're also pointing to it. For me, often can feel like the thing was already there, and I'm
Mm.
just kind of awakening to it. So that's what I see in what you're saying. Yeah.
Oh,
So
that's
please
really
continue.
nice. Oh, that's really nice. I
Mm.
really like that. Yeah, because it can have that quality of like, of course.
Hmm.
So you saying almost like I've always known this, I just didn't know that I did. Almost, is that what I'm hearing? Yeah, that's beautiful, because it is, isn't it? Once it's like before we've seen it, we can't see it. It's invisible. And in the moment of seeing, it has a rightness for us. It's very tailored, I think, to each individual. And I think the other thing that um, fascinates me about insight is I mean, I can share an experience I had on Salt Spring Island. It's not far from you,
Sure.
which just where insight comes without any meaning or words or anything. In fact,
Mm.
I wouldn't have even called it an insight. Um, I was really, really lucky to get to go to the Salt Spring School, the three principal school on Salt Spring Island with Chip Chipman and Elsie Spittle in 2017. And it was early in my principal's journey, and I'd been around it for a couple of years, and I was having an incredible few months just prior to going out there, a very kind of expanded feeling state. I can remember driving back from London to West Wales, where I live, which is about a 5-hour drive down a motorway, down the freeway, after a three principles training weekend. And the beauty of the autumn leaves on the embankment on the side of this freeway, I just was welling up and welling
Mm.
up and welling up. And again, no words, just this beauty filling me up in a way that I almost felt like I can't contain it. It's too beautiful. It's like, and this was happening a lot. I was often just had water falling out my eyes. And I went to Salt Spring Island, and I had just met the man who's now my husband. We were there together. So that I should mention that, because we were on a trip together there. But I sat in the 3-day school, and I just literally had water falling out of my eyes. I wasn't crying in the kind of sense of being upset. And I was also moving around, going to lunch, in the evening, get together with people. And I sat through the whole school, and I can't tell you anything that anybody said. And I even watched some of the recordings they put out after the school. And I was like, was I there? Because I don't remember anything that they said.
Wow.
But there was this, looking back, it's really interesting actually telling you about it now. I suppose I would say now that something was touched inside of me, and all this was like a clearing or a cleansing.
Mm.
And I had no words for it then. And, you know, I still have no words for what really was happening. But it was so outside anything I've ever experienced that I also didn't have any questions. You know, I wasn't disturbed or even confused. And I just remember that everything on Salt Spring looked so beautiful. And I suppose what's coming to me right now is I think I was surrendered in that time. And what a beautiful, beautiful feeling that is when we give up the fight.
Wow. Yeah. Oh, what an experience. And walking away from that, so when the school was over, what was that like for you?
Well, this very expanded state continued to some extent. I had a few days in Vancouver afterwards before I flew back. And again, I remember wandering around the city, just being delighted, you know, there's some concrete works, you might know it on, I can't remember exactly the name of the place, and they've painted them. So they're huge structures with these gorgeous multicolored paintings. And that was one of many things that I just found absolutely delightful. And all the travel too, you know, I'd never been to North America, although I've traveled a lot elsewhere. And it was dreamlike, you know, getting getting back from London back here. And I think it's quite a common story, you know, with people who've been around this. I think I would say I had a sort of year, maybe more, maybe 18 months, maybe 2 years of just, oh, all my problems have gone away.
Yeah.
And then and I think that it's very interesting because what you've just seen earlier in the call about when we try different things and our thinking shifts or settles or whichever it is, which allows wisdom to come in, allows things, and then we might think that things on the outside are working. In a funny sort of way, I think I've seen this really powerfully. I think I obviously need to keep seeing this, is that I somehow took the credit for what had happened.
Oh.
You know, it's a bit sort of like, oh, go me, you know, I'm that calm, you know, person I always wanted to be. Well, hey, I great. And it's really subtle, I think, that you don't realize you're doing that. You know, I was just very relieved, and I was just really enjoyed, you know, that and met some wonderful people and wonderful teachers through that time. And I was working as a facilitator myself. And then it's really interesting that in the last, I'd say, kind of year, 18 months, the mood swings and things for me came back. And it's very humbling. Because you kind of think, you know, I've graduated. And so, yeah, I mean, this is ongoing and it is very humbling.
Wow. Yeah. I was speaking to Maurice Godet-Copin on a previous episode, and she had a similar experience. For her, it was panic attacks and physical symptoms that headaches, that kind of thing. And yeah, that's really interesting. And so what have you seen anew when your mood swings returned? Anything you could share?
Yeah, I think my first reaction was disappointment.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, these again.
Mm.
And I'm really glad you've asked the question, because just now, as you were asking that, I thought, yeah, so I immediately went into a lot of thinking about mood swings, which is a very old track for me. because I spent decades thinking about them. So I've just seen that wants to kind of get going again. And so I sort of have an idea, and it was one shared with me by some wonderful teachers, Ian Watson and Carol Burrows, that things come back around because there's something to see, something further, something deeper to see. And perhaps, they would phrase it in terms of to see either again or more deeply the nature of the illusion. And when we saying things come back around again, and I can really see that where that's gone on in my life. It might be a similar circumstance, it might be a thought pattern, habit, it might be a behavior, and sometimes you can be in a completely different situation, but it's got a very old familiar feel. And it's really funny. I wrote a couple of poems called Old Tracks 1 and 2, and it's very much about falling into that habitual old thought patterns. And they're kind of curious because at one level they're familiar and they're comfortable, but then I think as our understanding deepens, they become uncomfortable. And I often feel like I should be in kindergarten with the principals. Like I'm a very slow and slightly stubborn learner, because often I see something, but I see it and it's helpful to see, but it doesn't necessarily immediately change what's going on for me. And I think one of the sort of deeper lessons for me is that I've seen and felt what it is to be in a beautiful feeling, to be in the flow of life. And it's gorgeous. I mean, who wouldn't want to be in that? But there's a sort of busy mind part of me that would, when things aren't like that, which is often, often it's not, my head wants to get busy. That old impulse to try and figure it out and fix it, which went quite quiet for quite a long time, kind of wants to come up again. So this time around, what it feels like is, for me, I was on an episode of another podcast which was called The Beautiful Feeling, and we talked a little bit about it. And really, I'm always curious about how deeply can I listen? And what I'm sort of, where I'm at, I guess, with it right now is that I have a sense that this is asking me to get quieter, to listen more deeply. Anything else that I might want to tweak and adjust, and I am messing around with diet and things, which is very familiar, going back through those things. Not to say some of that might be helpful. I'm menopausal, so there's always things we can do. But I can feel the difference. Like my busy mind really likes the idea of eating more broccoli or whatever it is. Because it's got a sort of seek and destroy, hunting and finding a solution, and it's got that feel to it, which is very familiar and used to bring a limited amount of satisfaction, let's face it. Whereas getting really, really quiet doesn't have that little push-pull. And it's funny that I said about surrendered, because I think that's really what life is asking of me, to go deeper into not knowing. And one of the things that I noticed in the disappointment is, as soon as we make our experience wrong, It shouldn't be happening. I should know better. It's just more busy thinking. And it also, then we're listening to that. We're just listening to that noise again, which prevents us from falling into a quieter space. Well, I don't want to say prevents us, because I do think it's all, if I'm in a beautiful feeling, I feel gratitude. I don't really think that I engineer that beautiful feeling. Maybe I can get in the way of it, but I'm not sure that I can click my fingers and go, right, be here now. But being still is like an act of faith that in looking towards the stillness, I'm inviting a quieter, a felt sense of presence in. And in that, I do know that's where the answers are. But it feels often that my busy mind wants to go off and be clever and go, yeah, no, but what about this?
Yes. Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. I was listening to a conversation with Dr. Bill Pettit the other day, and he was talking about presence. And it struck me, I was going through a period of pretty low mood, like depression at the time. And it struck me to wonder what it would be like to just be present with that feeling. And I've been exploring that lately, not trying to change it, not trying to make it better, make it go away, any of those things. And I think that's what you're pointing to. I'm just saying it in slightly different words. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think it is, because I think when we feel bad or off, it can be Pavlovian to just want to push that feeling away.
Yeah.
I haven't got time for this, I'm too busy, or there's important things to do, or it just feels lousy, just get away from me.
Yeah.
And I think there's something really beautiful in that. If I love this expression, there are no mistakes
Yeah.
in relation to our experience.
Yeah.
And, really, by the time you have an opinion about how you feel, it's already happened.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's like you have some feeling. It might be a sensation, it might be an emotional feeling, and then your mind gets busy making whatever it makes of that. But really, it's all after the effect, as in, I love the way that the principles teachings and Sid Banks, very famous quotes, I'll paraphrase, but that really happiness is one thought away, sadness is one thought away. And from that, if you're feeling low, you can take that and beat yourself up with it and go, I should find the happy thought, I should find the happy thought. Which we know, it just makes you feel worse. Because fundamentally, you're saying that how I feel is wrong. And what you're pointing to is, well, what happens if I just come into acceptance, I guess, that right now, this is what's here in my experience. And I think that in itself just opens a little bit of space. I don't know, have you found that? And what did you find when you
Yeah.
lent into that?
I found peace, for one thing, because I wasn't pushing against it and doing all the things you've just mentioned, saying to myself, this shouldn't be happening. Why is this happening? What have I done wrong? How can I fix it? All that stopped and went away. And the feeling I really get that I love when I do that is it's like I'm sitting with the feeling as a really good friend. So I feel this lovely feeling of, yeah, just complete acceptance and presence, and that the depression appreciates that from me, just like a good friend does when we sit with them without trying to change them or fix them or anything like that. Yeah, that's been my experience.
That's just so beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah, it was lovely.
And it's such a lovely direction to look in, because it's the love part of love and understanding.
Yeah.
You know, when we're down there kind of battling with our own mind, trying to see more or get insights, you know, the feeling isn't there.
Mm.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we can do that. Like I've seen this about the principles, so I should be able to get myself out of this. But what you did there was just so beautiful. It's like I just had an image as well of that kind of catching and holding,
Mhm.
you know, the lovely wool blanket or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And it's so funny, because it's really the most natural thing in the world to do. You alluded
Mm.
to that. If you were with a friend, generally speaking, if we're settled, that would be instinctive.
Yeah.
And yet it's very common that people in their own distress can go in the other direction of
Mhm.
and really, you know, we might call it self-criticism or self-judgment, but it's just thought, it's just more it's just more sensation moving through.
Mm.
In a way, you know, we don't always think of thought as sensory based, but I'm kind of beginning to wonder these days if it isn't actually slightly sensory based. We certainly react to thought in our body, but actually at the level of, you know, the mental level, I'm just very curious about that. Is it a sensory experience? Anyway,
Yeah.
that's a bit of a divergence.
Yeah. Well, and this brings me to a question that I sent you in advance about control. You have a podcast episode with Carla Royal on your website about control. And it struck me, well, a couple things, I guess. When you talked about the experience of, you know, driving on the motorway away from the retreat in London and being on Salt Spring and having that beautiful expanded experience, you, Juliet, didn't create that. You know, it just came. And then when it leaves, you don't control that either. So yeah, I'd love for you to talk about the illusion of control and how it holds us prisoner, which is what something that you said in the podcast.
Yeah, well, yes, Carla Royal, my co-host when we did those, wonderful, warm woman, and we had some amazing conversations there. Yeah, control, I think it's like so many of our kind of negative thoughts, it's a very compelling feeling, and it has this urgency in it. And one of the other things we sort of is related to this that we might talk about is, I think I also said something to the effect that love is behind
Yes.
every feeling. And I was pondering again on this, as I said it a little while ago, and it really looks to me that even when you look at all the behaviors that come out of fear, and control is one of the number one behaviors to come out of fear. I mean, why do we try and control things? We control things because we think we're not safe.
Mm-hmm.
And that might be physically not safe, emotionally not safe, it not safe from existential threats. And, you know, it goes without saying that, you know, if you're about to fall into a sinkhole or there's bombs going to drop on you, you don't need me or Alexandra to tell you how to deal with that. Your instincts will kick in and you'll be hopefully off or hide or whatever it is. But we're talking about control in which is often an overreaction to an imaginary threat.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not a psychologist, but I think psychologists can, you know, will see patterns of where you might be responding to something because of something that's happened in the past, and, you know, talk about triggers and all this kind of thing. But what's so lovely about the principles is that they'll point to the fact that it's back to my first insight, really. You have a thought in your mind that looks true. It doesn't really matter if it is true to anybody else. If it looks true to you, then this amazing body-mind system will kick in and do what it thinks it needs to do to protect you And that can be fight, flight, you know, one's probably faint, freeze. I think there's more. But control looks in that moment, like if you literally were faced with a savage beast attacking you, then all those responses would be appropriate and wise. But because the reason I said that control creates a prison is that in daily life, if our system is responding as if we were living with a savage beast, then your life becomes about survival. And I mean, it's very interesting when the mind is severely threatened. I've always been fascinated with the idea that it shuts off various functions that are not critical to life, like digestion would be one. And so when you think about it, it is a kind of, this is where the love piece comes in. Your whole body mind system, because I think at the core of us is a love of life. And by life, I mean this spirit energy, this intelligent energy that lives us. You were sort of touching on that. And control, weirdly, I mean, I'm just seeing this as I talk to you, you know, is about, given what looks true up here, the body mind doing its utmost to keep you alive and safe. And when you see it in that, through that perspective, it is actually a very beautiful thing. And on my kind of journey, I've come to be grateful for my many and varied coping mechanisms that I deployed, where I judged them harshly and resented them and worried about them. And I've come to see a certain beauty in the ways that I kept going, doing what looked like, you know, the best I had with what I understood. And so the prison is a sort of paradox in that in the sort of personal thought system you're living in, it is keeping you safe.
Yep.
And that's the principles in action working perfectly. And as the illusory nature of those fears falls away, and for some it falls away incrementally, very much in my case, and they haven't all gone. But at the core of it, you know, I think when you hear stories of people's sudden kind of collapsing of a lot of insecurity, it looks to me that what is being felt and really discovered or revealed, back to your point at the beginning, what's uncovered is that safety is well, it's both an illusion, but it's what's really inside us is perfect health at that more essential level. And every time I see a little bit more of that, I feel really grateful. And then I bump into things in my life that show me that there's still more layers there for me. There's still more to see. And this conversation is really touching me, because I think at the core of it, we are safe. How could we not be? I mean, life, as you said, is living us. And it knows how to do that far better than we do. So thank you, because this invitation to surrender, which I think life gives you, me, all of us at every turn, it might come off in little bits, but it's always pointing you towards you have everything you need and you can let go, but you'll only let go when you're ready. So.
Oh, beautifully said. Thank you. I'm going to have to go back and re-listen to that, because it was it was so deep. I think I missed some of it. So yeah, really, thank you for that. That was beautiful.
Mm.
We're coming close to the end of our time together. Is there anything we haven't touched on today that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Well, I think something that is really helpful to me as I go through and deepen, the two things really is, one is, don't be afraid to own your interest and your exploration as a valuable thing in your life. Sort of, stand tall with that, because you're being called. Make no mistake, back to your point, it's not us thinking, oh, one day, oh, perhaps I'll look at spiritual matters. And I do believe we're part of something wider and bigger. There are many, many people all across the planet who are drawn to what I call home. And that's not a coincidence, So be proud and stand tall in that exploration, because you're not just doing it for yourself, you're doing it for, it ripples out everyone you come into contact with and beyond in ways you can never see. And then, just in case we start taking it too seriously, my second side of it is lighten up, enjoy what there is to enjoy, give yourself a break. You can't force any of this, and you can't be asleep on the watch. Because so much is percolating under the surface, like that insight in Salt Spring. Like you said, there's no way I could have engineered that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I love the sort of Buddhist idea of relaxed and alert. I think it's always, there's just less to do than we think,
So true. Yes, absolutely. Well, Juliet, this has been amazing. So where can we find out more about you and your work?
Okay, well, I have a website, which I'm sure you'll probably point people to, but it's soulcare, SOLCARE.org. And there's a blog on there, and there's the podcast episodes. So people can contact me through there. I'm not super active on social media, so I post mainly pictures of landscapes. That's one of the things I love to do. So if people want to find me on there, you can look up my name on Instagram or Facebook. But say I'm not very interactive or active.
Right. Okay, great. Well, I will. Yes, I'll put a link to your website in the show notes at unbrokenpodcast.com. Well, thank you so much for being with me here today. It's been a real pleasure talking to you.
Oh, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for asking me.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.